then I started to think about my family because I knew how stressed they were and upset they were, and I thought they're going to be really, because I figured I was dead, you know, and I thought they're going to be really upset. So I thought I'm going to try and see them. I looked over the side and couldn't see them down in the hospital, but what I did see was this huge waterfall of stars. It was incredible. It was just like, it was like a big arc of stars, and as I looked down, I was going, wow, look at that, you know. And my eyes started to adjust, and as I looked down, I could see from one galaxy into another. It was like looking into infinity. And I started to see nebulas forming and colours, and it was just really beautiful. It was really amazing. So obviously I realised that I wasn't in the actual small darkened space that I thought I was in when I first arrived in this realm. I was actually in the universe itself. I was part of the universe. So that was a really liberating feeling. And then the most powerful thing was to happen right at the end of the whole experience. I lay down, closed my eyes, and I felt every single molecule of my body start to vibrate. And I opened my eyes and I looked ahead of me, and just beyond my feet and just beyond the first being of light that stood there was this huge tunnel of white light that was slowly closing in towards me. And this tunnel of white light was really intensely bright, and it was like there were flames that were slowly sort of circulating around the edge of this light. But I felt no fear whatsoever. I felt safe, and I was just more in awe of it. I was going, wow! And the energy was starting to feel really strong. I could feel every single molecule of my body vibrate with this energy of love from this huge tunnel of white light. And I knew I was being told then what I was looking at here was the source of all creation. You know, this was God, not the usual image of God that I figured I'd seen in the school books or what have you. You know, the guy with the beard on the ceiling of the Vatican in Rome. No, this was like God in the form of this huge tunnel of white light. And it was at that moment I was just so filled with joy, and I started to laugh to myself, you know. And it was at that moment that I came thrown straight back into my body, and then I was just like thrown back to earth, as it were. You know, I was back in the hospital. All the pain started rushing through me, you know. I was in agony, and I remember the lights above me, the fluorescent strip was just too much to look into. It was very bright. So there I was, back in my body.
This is the documentary from the BBC World Service. I'm Vishva Samani, and for this episode of Heart and Soul, I'm exploring spiritual awakenings among the non-religious.
There's loads of land here where I'm living now, and so I'm just surrounded by fields and trees, and there's a river just beyond there. There's also a small lake. Birds of prey flying over. You know, we get kites and buzzards. We've forgotten how to be part of the universe and to be guided by the universal energies. So yes, I really feel that being here. It's great.
David no longer drinks and lives a simple life in the English countryside, not far from where his accident happened. You've mentioned the afterlife, you've mentioned the white light, and even described that as God. Would you describe the experience as a religious experience?
No, not really. I wouldn't say it was religious. I would call it more of a spiritual awakening, which it was for me. It was completely the dark night of the soul for me. It was coming out of the worst possible moment of my life, everything collapsing all around me, and then suddenly having this wonderful experience which gave me a whole new lease of life. What I saw as being God was not the usual God that any faith has ever talked about. Normally God comes in some kind of human form, no matter what the faith is, whereas God was this tunnel of white light. And it's made me feel very, very much aligned with the energy of the universe. Encountering percussion as well, like the symphonies are really nice, just to sort of emphasise a bit of drama and a bit of colour.
David began composing music during his recovery. He also started painting vivid scenes of his vision without any previous experience as an artist.
So this is the one that's in the museum. This is the
His sister Janet, who lives nearby, has seen the change close up. Our museums now display her brother's otherworldly art and orchestras perform his music. She's happy for him, but unsure what to make of his spiritual vision.
When he first started doing paintings, it was really prolific. And that's when you sort of have to believe it all. But for me, the biggest thing, and I still can't get my head around it, is the music. How does one approach that if you don't know what you're doing? Where does that come from? It's just bonkers for me.
Do you think it was real?
I really want to believe it because I'm cynical, but I was brought up Christian, so I should believe it all. And I truly want to believe it all. And it's completely real to him. He doesn't mind that I don't get it. I think we all have that doubt because none of us really know, but he has no doubt.
David published a book about his experience 3 years ago. Thousands from around the world got in touch, and spiritual psychologist Dr. Steve Taylor was one of them. He studies spiritual awakenings among former addicts, war veterans, prisoners, and the very sick.
To me, his experience is one of the most remarkable stories of transformation I've come across. People become much more spiritual. They feel a sense of connection to nature, other human beings, so they have a sense that there's something deeper inside them that they didn't have access to before. People also develop new creative abilities like David.
David's experience involved extraordinary phenomena. He speaks about supernatural beings, a tunnel of light. I mean, that's more than just kind of feeling different after going through a period of difficulty.
When you have a near-death experience, it's so incredibly powerfully real, so much more intense than ordinary awareness. So obviously, after that, your vision of reality is forever changed. Almost everybody becomes convinced that there is some form of life after death. They believe that they have experienced it briefly, and because it was so powerfully peaceful and because they felt so euphoric, they didn't have any fear of death.
The most popular scientific theory suggests experiences like David's occur from a lack of oxygen or from a release of psychedelic chemicals in the brain when a person is close to death. But research is inconclusive and ongoing.
It often happens to people who have a secular view of life, and even after the experience, they don't necessarily become religious in a conventional sense. As a psychologist, I take these experiences very seriously because there is no coherent explanation in standard scientific terms.
And is there a taboo, or are people having conversations around experiences similar to David's?
There definitely has been a taboo, and that's because obviously these experiences, they contradict a standard scientific view of reality. They suggest that consciousness is not necessarily the product of the brain, that consciousness could even survive death of the body. But I think in recent years, the taboo has waned.
Today I've come with David to meet Gigi Strella at her North London home. She had a profound experience of her own, and a group she created in 2014, Near Death Experience UK, now has around 1,000 members.
I'm looking forward to meeting her, Gigi. She'll be really interested to find out a little bit more about her experience. It's always great to chat to other people about a near-death experience. It's like a moment of affirmation, if you like. Hi, it's David here. Good to meet you. Hello, yeah. Yeah.
Obviously there's quite a lot of people that come away from their experience very enthused and inspired, and they have revelations and change their life, and there are a lot who also really struggle. Actually, it can be a very debilitating experience, and a lot of people don't talk about it, and what ends up happening is that people just internalise it. I definitely wanted to reach out to other people that struggle to talk about their experiences.
In 2011, Gigi was rushed to hospital with internal bleeding caused by an undiagnosed birth defect. She wasn't given a blood transfusion in time and lost consciousness.
There was a distinct feeling of slipping away. I knew that I was leaving this physical form. I And for me it was very much like sinking back into a hammock, very seamlessly, very peacefully, very beautifully actually, I would say. Then I left and I was in a void rather than what was quite often referred to as the tunnel of light. So I was in nothingness and nowhere, which was very disorientating, but it was absolutely filled with peace and a sense of love. But at the same time, I wasn't Gigi, but yet I still existed. I still had conscious awareness. I didn't feel any sense of I'm going to meet a maker of any sort. I didn't feel like I was going to transition to some other place. I was just in this open space-time continuum without physical form, but very much with conscious awareness and presence.
How did you feel, well, straight afterwards, how did you feel straight after the actual experience itself?
They resuscitated me, and so the first moments when I literally crash landed back into my body was a hyper sensitive awareness of all the senses. So I was struck by blinding light and pain just surging through my body because it was where I left. So to return to my body in physical force, and it was as if I had been reborn, so all those senses were very heightened. It was very disorientating, and the place that you've been to is more stark and true than this place, which almost, when you come back to it, it feels more like a dream world.
Also, I had exactly the same feelings when I came back over the rest of the street. It was like screaming into my eyes, you know.
Similar to you, I had this sort of euphoric state of being for quite a while, and I would just have to run my mouth off about my experience to anyone who was willing to listen, because I felt so desperate to communicate what had happened in this other place. Another fantastic term you used, the ultra real. I felt like I had brought some of the ultra real into this experience, and I was living this world with that residue.
Why would you say that our experiences differ? You know? I mean, there's similarities, of course, but when you describe things as different in my experience, what's your take on that?
I didn't have an encounter with another being, and lots of people do speak about them, and I don't know how much this tunnel of light plays into how far along the journey of death you've traversed.
I spoke to people from various faiths. You know, I remember when I was in the hospital, I asked straight away if I could speak to the hospital chaplain to try and make sense of it, because I was completely unspiritual. Did you speak to any other people in any other faiths?
I did explore further. I went to the Muslim imam, I went to the Buddhist monk, I went to the Jewish rabbi, but I just wanted to know, in your faith, in your belief structure, what just happened to me? What was that void? And what lies thereafter? I did have an existential crisis. When you are in the other space, you have such an incredible understanding of the universe and how it functions. When I came back, I sort of had this peculiar comprehension of quantum physics. So I went on an exploratory path also with yoga and Hinduism and Buddhism, and that path then led me to the more alternative beliefs in each of those religions. Sufism, the Christian Gnostic traditions, and as profound as those experiences are for those people that do dedicate their lives to any particular belief system, it just wasn't going to work for me. It's almost like my experience taught me actually our consciousness, our awareness, our existence, it's bigger than that. It surpasses all of those human constructs we have here. I now really do believe we are sort of incredibly interconnected.
I agree with you on that, that we were connected. Because in my experience, I was actually aware that I was in the universe itself, I was part of the universe.
There is such a respect and such an understanding that we are life force energy interconnected with every other life force energy. I say very often I have all the time in the world for religion and none of it at all. I invested many, many years into investigations and I've not really come to any conclusions.
As Gigi and David continue their conversations, growing online communities, as well as researchers like Steve Taylor, remain endlessly fascinated by their experiences.
One thing that near-death experiences definitely suggest is that we don't understand consciousness. There are things that are beyond our limited intellect and our limited awareness. We like to pride ourselves as human beings that we can explain reality, we can explain all our experience. Well, we can't. There are things that are just too strange to make sense of.
You've been listening to the documentary from the BBC World Service. This episode of Heart and Soul was produced and presented by me, Ishva Samani.
This is the BBC World Service, and on the inquiry this week, I'm Tanya Beckett. 6 months into Israel's war in Gaza, the country's Prime Minister is under pressure from within Israel and from allies abroad, including America. On the inquiry this week, how secure is Benjamin Netanyahu's leadership? The inquiry at bbcworldservice.com/inquiry. At bbcworldservice.com, health check. I wonder if you ever look around the globe and sometimes despair that things might never improve. If so, is there a way of feeling more hopeful about the world or about your own life? I'll be with a live audience at the Northern Ireland Science Festival in the city of Belfast, looking at the psychology of hope. This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station. Hello and welcome to Newsday on the BBC World Service with